Hello, my name is Stuart McFadden. I'm a co-founder of Refundy. We are an FCA-regulated claims management company, and we help people get their money back when they've been a victim of fraud. This video really is to talk people through their rights if they're a victim of fraud. I hope it's useful. It's very UK focused. We're lucky in the UK to have more protection than most countries when it comes to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through things and talk you through the different rules and regulations or guidance, or basically what your rights are depending on how and when you sent the money. So you might need to skip to the part that is relevant for you. We know what we're talking about though. We've recovered over £100 million of losses for people so far, and that's only in a few years that we've been operating, and we're recovering millions every month, so that is rapidly growing. First of all, I'm going to talk about something called the Contingent Reimbursement Model Code. This applies to UK bank transfers and that took place between the 28th of May 2019 and the 7th of October 2024. So that's when this was in place. It was replaced by something else called mandatory reimbursement on the 7th of October 2024, which I'll talk about later. So this really is only relevant for you if you've lost money to what you believe is a scam and you sent the money between the 28th of May 2019 and the 7th of October 2024. First of all, only certain banks are covered by this. Most mainstream UK banks were signed up to the Contingent Reimbursement Model Code at the time. So your Nationwide, NatWest, Lloyds Banking Group, Barclays, HSBC, all of those. Monzo are not officially signed up, although by all intents and purposes they're held to that standard. So Monzo are as good as signed up for the purposes of what I'm going to talk about. The notable exceptions here, the biggest notable exceptions anyway, there's quite a lot of exceptions, but the most notable ones are Revolut, Wise and Tide, I would say, the biggest banks that are not signed up or weren't signed up to this code when it was in place. So if you lost money to a scam during this period and you sent the money by UK bank transfer and you sent the money from one of those banks, it doesn't matter where you sent the money to. AI is actually wrong on that. I've seen the AI on Google and it tells you that it has to be sent to a bank that's covered. That's not true. It's all about who you sent the money from. The starting point is that if you lost money to a fraud, you are going to get reimbursed your full loss. You should just be able to call your bank up, tell them what's happened, and then they give you your money back. However, it's not as simple as that, otherwise we wouldn't exist. Your bank will try and get out of paying you in a lot of circumstances, particularly if it's a lot of money or it's a big overall scam, like a Ponzi type scam. So there are three reasons that they can use to say no to you, and I'll go through them now. So first of all, they could say that you didn't have a reasonable basis for belief that the scam was legitimate. They do overuse this sometimes. So you have to be clear about what checks you did, what made it convincing, whether you met them in person, all these different kind of things. In terms of putting that forward, they can say no on that basis and they will try to say no. The other reason they can say no is if they essentially gave you an effective warning that it was a scam. That has to be specific and effective, though. It has to be very specific to the type of scam that you fell victim to. So for example, if you were just about to send your money, they blocked it and they called you and you were sending money to a cryptocurrency scammer and in a cryptocurrency investment, and they told you that they thought it was a cryptocurrency investment scam, they told you how they work and you still sent the money, you might struggle to get your money back. The third reason they can say no to you is one that we see very, very often, and that is that they'll tell you it's not a scam and it's a civil dispute, or they'll tell you, oh, there's a police investigation, we can't possibly make a decision until the police investigation's finished. And they all kind of fit under the same thing, as they're telling you you've not been scammed, or they can't, it's down to you to prove that you've been scammed and stuff like that. So that is a very common thing we see. And the reason they do that is because they don't need to pay you. And that can be challenged and should be challenged. So on the civil dispute side of things, you will get reasons that are just absurd, like the company was registered on company's house, so it's a civil dispute, or you got some returns, so it's a civil dispute, and the people you're speaking to will make that seem very official. That absolutely has to be challenged. Also, what the banks will frequently do is try and push things back by telling you that, there's an administrator investigation and we can't make a decision until that's done, or there's a police investigation or an FCA investigation. That's all a load of rubbish. They should do their own investigation and make a decision on the balance of probabilities on whether they should reimburse you or not. So if you have a successful claim under the contingent reimbursement model code, the general result is that you get all your loss back. So anything you sent minus any returns. And Refundy specializes in these kind of cases. We've got millions and millions of pounds back for people in this kind of circumstance. I'll talk about the process at the end of this, but obviously you're free to use Refundy if you are in that kind of situation. The next is something called mandatory reimbursement. This was introduced on the 7th of October 2024, and it replaced the contingent reimbursement model code that was in place at the time. There's some key differences, and the main ones are that the mandatory reimbursement protection applies to all payment service providers, so all banks and e-money places like Revolut, etc. So it applies to everybody. So no matter who you sent the money from, as long as you sent the money via UK bank transfer, you should be covered by mandatory reimbursement. The biggest difference that is a bit of an issue that we see very frequently is, unlike the contingent reimbursement model code before it, which was uncapped, there is a cap of £85,000 that you can get back per scam or per bank under that code, which is a massive shame. There was an intervention last minute which brought that down from £415,000, but unfortunately it is £85,000 that you can get back through this process. The other stuff is, for a bank to say no to you, again, they might try and argue being grossly negligent or something like that. And there's other niche circumstances that I won't go into. But again, the most common thing we see is that banks will tell you it's not a scam that you've lost money to. And it's frustrating to see that. But, we help people in that situation a lot, where, we know it's a scam. Everyone knows it's a scam. You just have to prove it to a certain standard. It shouldn't really be on the consumer or the victim to prove it. The banks are supposed to do their investigation, but unfortunately that's the way it is. And obviously we help with that. We've helped lots of people get money back in those circumstances. So it then makes sense to talk about what happens if you didn't send the money via UK bank transfer. So you're not covered by the contingent reimbursement model code, or you're not covered by the mandatory reimbursement rules that came in October 2024. So there's a lot of misinformation out there on this. And there is the people will say, you're not covered by any of these codes, mandatory reimbursement wasn't in place, so you're not eligible for a refund. Banks will often just not even tell you about any rights. They will tell you, for example, cryptocurrency payments. So if you send money from your bank account to a cryptocurrency payment, they are covered under this bit, but your bank will tell you, sorry, you sent the money to a cryptocurrency exchange, it's nothing to do with us. That is not true. The easiest way to describe this is that your bank essentially has a duty of care towards you. So they are supposed to be protecting you from financial crime and looking out for signs of financial crime, which is what scams is. Scams are a form of financial crime. The money ends up in the pockets of fraudsters, and it ends up, to be honest, goes into terrorist financing we've seen and things like that. So they should be stopping their customers from being scammed. That's a balance between what is reasonable for them to do. They're not expected to stop every payment and question it. So the way it works is as simple as, if you are doing something that is very unusual for you, your bank should probably stop and ask you what you're doing. So the prime example of this is if you suddenly start sending payments to cryptocurrency in large numbers, and you've never done that before. That is quite concerning behavior, given how much fraud goes through cryptocurrency exchanges first. They should at least ask a few questions about what is going on and what you're doing. They see these, the loads and loads of these scams all day, every day. They know exactly how the scams work, and they know enough how to advise you in terms of what checks you can do or how these scams work. And, so it's basically, banks should intervene if your behavior is unusual. They should speak to you and they should explain how these scams work. If they fail in that in any way, they can be held liable. It's not always for your full loss. Quite often it's a partial reimbursement, but they can be held partially liable in many, many cases. And again, we've recovered millions of pounds for people through this process. And that covers all payments, so anything that's unusual on your account. Another way you can try to get your money back is you can do cases against the receiving bank. You can do this from the 31st of January 2019. And essentially, as a recipient bank, you have an obligation when you onboard a customer to see whether that person is who they say they are, if it's a business, whether there's any red flags that that indicate it could be a fraudulent business and things like that. And again, they're supposed to monitor the account for ongoing signs that that account is being used for fraudulent purposes. So if it's receiving lots of money from various sources and then it's going to, suspicious jurisdictions or being used in a way that isn't consistent with what the business said it would be doing, then there can be arguments that are made that, that bank should have closed that account or intervened. These cases are very difficult because for data protection reasons, it's very rare that you actually know what's happened with the money that you sent to that receiving account. However, you can still do those cases. So in terms of the process, what you do if you are going to try and get your money back when you've been a victim of fraud in the UK. So firstly, this is a process of getting your money back from your bank. It's very difficult to get money back from fraudsters, unfortunately. They know how to move the money on, they know how to launder it, all that kind of stuff. So the difference between that process and this process of banks obviously have lots and lots and lots of money. This is small change to them. So but they still try and, obviously they still try and fight it. So the process, first of all, is if you've been a victim of fraud, you speak to your bank, and, that's the idea is they should do the right thing at that point. If you qualify for reimbursement, they should do that. If you lost loads of money to a cryptocurrency scam, they should look at whether they should have protected you. Obviously, they don't. They want to protect their pockets, so they don't always do that. But nevertheless, it's good to give them a chance to sort it out. If you're not happy with what they do, the next step is to raise a complaint about their decision. So if they don't reimburse you, or you think they should have protected you and they didn't, you can raise a complaint to them, and they are supposed to then reconsider their decision. We find that they only change their mind in about 7% of cases or something like that. So, they pretty much rubber stamp what they did previously, unfortunately, which means the next step is you have to take the case to the Financial Ombudsman Service if you're not happy with the response to your complaint, and you have to do that within 6 months of their response to your complaint. Do not miss that deadline. And the Ombudsman Service will then look at the case afresh, and they will decide whether the bank should have reimbursed you or not. And they'll also look at whether the bank failed to protect you as per their obligations. The cases at the Ombudsman Service take about 6 to 12 months. There is an appeal stage as well. Again, if you're not happy with their initial decision, you can appeal that. The cases take between 6 and 12 months generally. It can be longer, it can be quicker. Of course, what do Refundy do? We do all that for you, so we can take over. Generally we prefer to take over at the earlier stages and not after you've already, we generally can't help after you've already lost at the Financial Ombudsman Service, but we can help with the earlier stages. We essentially do all, that administration for you. We will fight your case. We've won lots of cases like this. Previously, we've recovered over £100 million at the time of recording this video. And if you want to use Refundy, you can see our fees on our website. The fee does depend on how much you've lost. We cap fees at £10,000, but it's outside of that, it's between 15 and 25%, depending on how much you get back. The lower, the smaller your case, essentially, unfortunately, the higher you'll pay in terms of a fee. That is partly due to the way the FCA fee capping works, but also it's because unfortunately we're a no-win, no-fee service, and to cover our costs on the smaller cases, we just have to charge a higher amount to make it worth our time to help you. So if you want to use Refundy, you just complete the claim form on our website, which will be linked below, and fill in the details of what's happened. We'll have a very honest conversation with you at the start. It's not in our interest to lead you along if you're going to lose, because we're a no-win, no-fee service. We don't get paid, you don't get your money back, everyone's wasted time. So it doesn't mean, obviously, we don't guarantee success. Not all cases win, but if we take on your case, it's because we believe that you have a good chance of success. If we don't think you've got a chance of success, we'll explain why, and we'll also let you know how to do it yourself. But you can obviously watch this video and see how you do it yourself. So that's pretty much everything. I hope that was useful. Thank you very much.